Rodney Dangerfield's performance in Caddyshack 1980 is one of the most talked about parts of the film. But there's a side to it that most fans completely missed. In this video, we break down what actually happened behind the scenes and what most viewers never noticed while watching. Join us as we uncover what really went on behind Rodney Dangerfield's unforgettable role in Caddyshack, a completely different idea than what audiences ever saw. When Caddyshack was first being developed, it looked very different from the wild, unpredictable golf comedy people know today. The original idea was not focused on constant chaos or over-the-top characters. Instead, it started as a smaller, more grounded story centered on life inside a country club and the people who work there. The main focus was meant to be a young caddy trying to understand his place in a world shaped by wealth, status, and strict social rules. In early script versions, the story leaned more toward working-class golf culture. The writers wanted to show what it was like for employees like caddies, groundskeepers, and staff members who served the members of an elite club. This version had more structure and followed a clearer plot with character development, daily struggles, and a more traditional comedy style. The original tone was also very different. The writers were aiming for a more controlled and structured comedy where jokes were carefully placed within the story. It was not designed to be heavily improvised. Scenes were written with specific dialogue and planned interactions. The humor came from situations and character behavior rather than spontaneous jokes or chaotic performances. As the project moved forward, things began to change. More writers and comedians became involved, and the script started to shift. Instead of sticking to a strict storyline, the team began allowing more freedom during filming. Actors were encouraged to experiment with dialogue and try different versions of their lines. This slowly turned the movie into a looser and more flexible production. Over time, the structured idea of a caddy-focused story faded. The film became less about one main character's journey and more about a collection of funny moments happening around a golf course. A big reason for the original idea was the writers' own experiences at real golf clubs. They had spent time observing how these places worked, including the behavior of members and staff. These real-life experiences helped shape the early version of the script. They noticed strong class differences, strict rules, and unusual personalities, which inspired many of the characters and situations. However, instead of staying realistic, the movie gradually moved toward exaggeration and free-form comedy. What started as a grounded story about a caddy's world slowly transformed into a much more unpredictable film filled with improvisation and shifting ideas. The script for Caddyshack was written by Harold Ramis, Brian Doyle Murray, and Douglas Kenney. At the time, they were all still relatively new when it came to writing a full feature film of this scale. Even though they were already known in comedy circles, this kind of production brought a different level of pressure. They were working on a studio film with expectations, deadlines, and constant changes, which made the writing process very intense. None of the three writers had experience directing or fully shaping a film of this style from start to finish. They came from backgrounds in sketch comedy, improv, and smaller writing projects. But a feature film required structure, planning, and a clear storyline. The studio also placed tight deadlines on the project. This meant the writers had to produce material quickly while still adjusting to feedback. Even while filming was happening, new jokes, dialogue, and scene changes were being written on the spot. Instead of finishing a final script before shooting began, the story kept changing during production. Many scenes in Caddyshack were not fully scripted in the traditional sense. Instead of detailed dialogue, the writers often provided joke outlines that gave a basic idea of what needed to happen, but left space for actors to fill in the details. One of the most unusual things about Caddyshack during production was that it did not really have a clear lead character. In most films, there is one main person whose story guides everything. That was not firmly set here. Instead, the movie shifted between several characters. At different stages of development, the story tried to focus on different people. Danny Noonan, played by Michael O'Keefe, was meant to be one of the central characters. His storyline followed a young caddy trying to earn money for college. This gave the film a more traditional structure at first. At the same time, Ty Webb, played by Chevy Chase, also had a strong presence. His character was calm, mysterious, and often delivered short, unusual lines about golf and life. However, Ty's scenes did not always connect directly to Danny's story. Then there was Al Shervick, played by Rodney Dangerfield. His character brought loud energy and constant disruption. Every time he appeared, the tone of the film shifted. Because of this, the film kept changing focus depending on who was on screen. This lack of a single main character created confusion during production. Even people working on the film were not always sure which storyline was meant to be the most important. Bill Murray played a huge role in shaping one of the most memorable parts of Caddyshack. Even though his character, Carl Spackler, was barely developed in the original script, Carl was not written as a major focus. He was meant to be a small supporting character with limited screen time. When Bill Murray arrived on set, he brought a very different approach. Instead of simply following the script, he came prepared with his own ideas. He built Carl Spackler into a much more detailed and unusual personality. Murray added new lines, changed existing dialogue, and often created entire moments during filming without them being fully written beforehand. One of the most famous examples is Carl's obsession with the gopher. In the original script, the gopher storyline was very small. But Murray expanded it into long monologues where Carl talks directly to his imaginary target. Many of Carl Spackler's most well-known lines came from these on-set changes. Instead of sticking to one fixed version of a scene, Murray would try different jokes in each take. This meant that scenes were often filmed multiple times, each with new dialogue. Editors later had to choose from several different versions of the same scene. In a 2025 interview marking the film's 45th anniversary, Murray reflected on that freedom. "Nobody knew what they were making. We were just trying to make each other laugh. The script was a suggestion." That same interview, featured in the new documentary Caddyshack, the accidental classic released on Netflix in January 2026, revealed that Murray kept a notebook on set filled with alternate lines that never made it into the film. The documentary also showed never-before-seen footage of Murray improvising for nearly 20 minutes straight, during the famous Cinderella story scene, with only about 30 seconds ending up in the final cut. One of the most unusual parts of Caddyshack production was how seriously the crew treated the animatronic gopher. Even though it was not a real animal or a human actor, it was handled like a full character on set. The gopher was not just a background prop. It became an important part of many scenes and required careful coordination. The gopher was operated using animatronics, which meant it had mechanical parts controlled by technicians off-camera. These operators had to move its head, eyes, mouth, and body at the right moments. Because of this, timing became very important. Actors were instructed on when to look at it, react to it, or pause for its movements. However, the gopher did not always cooperate easily. The animatronic system was complex and often unreliable. Because of technical issues, multiple versions of the gopher had to be built. When one version failed, another had to be used or repaired quickly. These technical problems affected the production schedule. In some cases, the limitations of the gopher's movement forced the filmmakers to change how scenes were written. By the end of production, the gopher had become a recognizable presence in the movie, even though it was never meant to be a major character. Rodney Dangerfield's role in Caddyshack almost did not become what audiences remember today. At the start of production, his character Al Shervick was not planned as a central part of the movie. He was meant to be a smaller supporting character who would appear in a few scenes. As filming went on, that changed. The creative team realized that Dangerfield brought a very different kind of energy compared to the rest of the cast. Because of this, his role was gradually expanded. More scenes were added for him, and existing scenes were adjusted so that Al could appear more often. A large part of what made his character stand out was his improvisation. Many of his best-known lines were not fully written in the script. Dangerfield would come up with jokes on set and deliver them in his own style. However, not everyone was immediately comfortable with his performance. Studio executives had concerns about how over-the-top it was. His delivery was loud, fast, and very different from the more structured parts of the film. Despite these concerns, his scenes continued to grow. As more footage was reviewed, it became clear that Dangerfield's performance was one of the most entertaining parts of the movie. By the end of production, what was originally a minor role had turned into one of the standout performances in Caddyshack. What most fans missed, and what Rodney Dangerfield revealed in a rarely seen 1986 interview that resurfaced in early 2026, was that his character's famous "'Cause I've been in more places than a sneeze" Attitude was actually a direct parody of real country club members he had encountered while working as a young caddy himself. Dangerfield never played golf before the film. He learned entirely during production. In that interview, he admitted, "I didn't know a putter from a driver, but I knew those rich guys. I knew how they talked, how they looked down on people. That was easy." The 2026 documentary also confirmed that Dangerfield's wardrobe, the loud plaid pants and the white shoes, was his own idea. The costume department originally wanted him in muted tones. He showed up on the first day of filming in his own clothes and refused to change. The directors loved it. One of the biggest challenges during the making of Caddyshack was how much improvisation took place on set. While it helped create many funny moments, it also caused constant delays. Many scenes took hours longer to complete than scheduled. Instead of filming a scene once or twice, the cast would often try several versions before the director decided what worked best. Another issue was that actors frequently broke character because of ad-libbing. Since many cast members were making up lines on the spot, it was hard for others to stay serious. This created a cycle where filming would begin, break down due to laughter, and then restart again. Directors also had to deal with the challenge of shooting multiple versions of the same scene. A scene might be filmed one way with one set of jokes, then filmed again with completely different lines. Script supervisors faced their own difficulties. With so much improvisation, it became very hard to keep everything consistent. In post-production, editors had to work through a large amount of footage that did not always follow a clear structure. Entire sequences were sometimes rebuilt using different takes because the improvised versions worked better than the original scripted scenes. The ending of Caddyshack went through a lot of changes before the final version made it to the screen. The final golf tournament sequence was reshot multiple times because the filmmakers were not fully satisfied with how the story was wrapping up. At first, the original ending did not have a very clear sense of resolution. There were concerns about whether the conclusion felt complete. Because of this, the filmmakers kept revisiting the final act. Different versions of the golf tournament sequence were filmed to see what worked best. Audience testing also played a role. When early cuts were shown to test viewers, different reactions helped guide what needed to be adjusted. Based on feedback, the filmmakers went back and reworked parts of the ending to improve pacing and humor. During this process, certain character outcomes were also changed late in production. Once filming was complete, the editing process became very important. Editors had to take multiple versions of scenes and decide how to combine them into one final sequence. The final result is a golf tournament sequence that feels energetic, unpredictable, and slightly chaotic. That tone was not accidental. It came from the fact that the ending was built from many different versions, adjustments, and creative choices made throughout production. In April 2026, the surviving cast members, including Chevy Chase, Michael O'Keefe, and Brian Doyle Murray, reunited at a special 45th anniversary screening in Los Angeles. Chase, now 82, joked about the chaos on set. "We had no idea what we were doing. Harold Ramis kept telling us to trust the process. The process was chaos." Doyle Murray revealed that the famous bishop scene, where a clergyman delivers a nonsensical blessing, was almost cut from the film entirely. Test audiences hated it, but Ramis fought to keep it. Today, it is considered one of the film's cult classics. As for the gopher, the original animatronic was believed lost for decades. In 2025, it was discovered in a storage unit in Burbank, purchased at auction for $125,000 by a private collector, and featured in the Netflix documentary. The gopher now has its own Instagram account with over 2 million followers. If you enjoyed these behind-the-scenes facts, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos on classic movies you thought you already knew.